Hello and welcome to Grim 3D. Today we are going to help the monster breathe a little bit better. Stick around. So here's the base plate for the Monster D9 500. And the way it goes up on there, it goes up on underneath. This part right here is for the power supply, where the power supply, the mean well that's in there, actually has a pretty good sized fan right here. And you can hear it start up when it starts working. But over here, this is the fan that cools off the main board. All right, now the main board is cooled with this little tiny 24 volt fan. Now I've heard and I've read a couple of places on the internet that this fan really doesn't do that great of a job. I'm going to actually replace it with this 92mm Noctua. Now, before you say anything, I know the Noctuas, they're not the most powerful fan. They're also not even the quietest, but they are a pretty good balance between being quiet and air volume. So I chose this one. It's pretty good. It's also pretty slim, because this fan that originally went inside the box, I'm actually going to mount this one underneath the box. So it has to actually fit between the box and my table, which should easily fit because the feet on the D9 are pretty tall. So let's go see where we're going to have to put this. One of the first items is going to be opening up this hole so that it can accommodate this size fan. So as you can see, here's the base for my printer, and it originally went right there. And here's where the original fan went. And as you can see, it's designed to blow up onto these stepper drivers right here. Now, the reason for having more cooling right there is that these stepper drivers, if they are overheated, they will skip steps. So anytime you're printing and any of your drivers skip steps, you're looking at an inconsistent print. Okay, so the idea is I want to put a nice big fan. I want it as far down this way as I can get it, and I want it blowing up in there to not only cover these stepper drivers, but keep the entire interior of this nice and cool. So it would blow up in here, and then everything would exhaust out this way. I'm thinking that's a pretty good idea, but what I want to do now is figure out exactly where the fan's going to go. So if I have this up here, and basically I want the fan, I'm seeing that this is the same size as the base of that, so I can maybe get rid of that for now. So if I have the fan and I want the fan to be blowing basically right there, remember the fan's going to be on the outside of the enclosure, hanging off the bottom. So then how do I keep these cords from getting caught up in the fan? I printed myself a little fan cover right there. It fits on there, so this will go, the sheet metal of the base will go between here and there, and then this will be able to push those or hold those cords up out of the way with a little tiny bit of space in there. Should work great. So I'm going to go ahead and measure this. So with my caliper right here, which is just because it's a convenient way of measuring this, I am seeing that the center of my fan is basically 3 1/4 inches from the side. See that? And then to get it in there just high enough to clear everything, it is basically 2 1/2 inches from the bottom. So in 3 1/4 and up 2 1/2. I'm going to mark the center of this fan. So I'm trying to do this without much of a glare here, but it seems to not be working really well. There's still some glare here, but while I was maneuvering from the D9 over to here, I did find my little machinist ruler here. I'm going to go ahead and mark in here 3 1/4. and up 2.5. So I'm thinking that the center point of my fan is going to be there, and if I look at this, that particular hexagon is the center of that. It looks like I'm in pretty good shape. That looks like a pretty good position for the fan. Now I'm going to mark this with my broken tipped X-Acto knife here. I have a pretty good idea now of where the circle is. Fill in some of those lines so I can see them better when I get out from underneath the light. Now double check, I got the center, I got all the way around, it looks to be in the right place, and I am going to go cut this out. What I'm going to use is a handheld jigsaw with a metal blade in it. I'm going to try that. I hope it doesn't scratch this up too bad. I might cover this with some tape, keep it from scratching up too bad. So, stay tuned. So, I was able to get the hole cut. It's not fantastic, but it doesn't have any sharp, grabby edges on it. I did not end up having a metal blade for my handheld jigsaw, but it worked out pretty good. I actually cut this with a set of tin snips. Not so easy. My hands are kind of tired now, but you'll notice that I got 4 holes drilled and they're pretty much right where they need to be. Everything here should work pretty good. So now I am going to work on getting this fan mounted. So it needs to be mounted on the outside with the wires on the inside. So I'm going to pop this wire clip out here. That way I can have the wires kind of separate from the fan. And I can then go ahead and put the fan on there. So now if you look at the feet for the printer that this has to clear, you are looking at 3/4 of an inch, and you can see that I am at a little over 1/2 an inch, so I have a little bit of space left, but I may in fact need to replace the feet with something a little bit taller to make this work. I'd rather have Monster be able to breathe than have it close to the table, and I can always 3D print myself some other feet. So we're looking at that fan cover on that, and then I have a second fan cover for the inside. Let's go like that. So I'm going to sandwich those together with some screws. because this may actually vibrate a little bit, the fan and the motor and all this print stuff, I'm using nylon lock nuts on there just as a precaution. So now we're in there in pretty good shape. That's the inside. I'm hoping that these aren't too long, aren't going to get anything up in my board. We'll have to go check that in a minute. There's the outside that's underneath the printer, and check my 3/4 of an inch. I think I'm a little bit over on the 3/4 of an inch with this screw heads, but it should work. I may just put some washers underneath these or something for now, underneath the screw feet just for now, and see what happens with that. So there is my fan installation. Now for the power option. Now I know that the Noctuas come with this nice power cord right here, but I am going to get rid of this. Now there's a couple of problems with this fan. First of all, it's a 4-wire fan. It's got a blue and a green and a yellow and a black. But for this installation, I really only need the yellow and the black, because I just want it to run full speed all the time. And so there's my yellow and my black. So I'm going to get rid of these other wires. I don't want them to get caught in the fan either, so I'm going to go leave those a little bit long. And now, the other problem you're going to say is that this is a 12-volt fan and the D9 is a 24-volt system. So to that I say buck converter. So what this little fantastic object does is it pulls in voltage anywhere from, I think this particular model is from 6 volts to 48 volts. And then you can adjust it right here for this side to put out anywhere from, I don't know, 48 volts to 6 volts. But I'm going to adjust this to put out 12 volts, and it's a very regulated power delivery system. So even if this fluctuates, which is not going to, because 24 volts is 24 volts, and the meanwhile puts out a really clean 24 volt signal. So even if this fluctuates, this should still stay the same. The output should still stay the same. So these are the buck converters. I think I got these a pack of 10 for not too much money, and I'm going to then just, because remember this is the inside, so this is up, I'm going to just double-sided sticky tape that buck converter right there. So, but for now, we are going to work on the buck converter for a minute. Over here I have my trusty bench power supply, and my bench power supply I'm going to set very carefully for 24 volts. So I've got 24 volts on the power supply. I'm going to go back and I'm going to do some soldering on the buck converter. So my yellow wire is going to be my positive, and the orange wire will be my negative. And even though these ends are not the exact ends that go onto the main board, these will actually plug right in side by side, so I don't have a problem there. So then what I'm going to do is make sure that I don't short this out by putting it on a little piece of paper here. I'm going to grab my handy dandy, cheap, but works just fine, digital multimeter, and I'm going to go ahead and clip this onto my buck converter so it can read the output voltage. And remembering that my yellow is the positive, I'm going to then hook up my power supply, which you'll notice is now drawing a current. For the buck converter, we got a light that's on here, and we've got it putting out 17.9 volts. So I'm going to grab an implement so that I can turn that potentiometer knob. That's the wrong way. And I'm going to turn this down until it gets to 12 volts. Oh, a little too far. All right, 12 volts. And if you notice, my voltage on my power supply can fluctuate by quite a bit, up to 30 volts, down to 15 volts, and my buck converter stays at 12 volts. So put that that bench supply back. Now I've got it on 12 volts. Now we go ahead and we can turn off the power supply for now, or just disconnect it. And we can solder the leads in for the Noctua fan. And in this setup, the yellow is the positive, black is the negative. I guess I don't need that long a lead, maybe I'll trim that. Maybe start with the negative right there. Solder that on. Trim those up. Flush cutters. Nice and clean. And now I can test my fan setup with just by hooking my power supply back up, and my Noctua should start up. Now you'll notice I'm pulling about a tenth of an amp, less than a tenth of an amp. So my fan is spinning. I can actually feel pretty decent amount of air coming through there. It's not a huge amount. It's not like blasting, but the original 24 volt fan, you couldn't feel any air coming through there. So I am going to double check and make sure that my buck converter is throwing the proper voltage when it's under load. Which it is a little bit low, 11.8. So I'm going to go ahead and crank that up a little bit. There we go. So we should be able to expect it to run about like that when it's in the machine. Now all that's left is to go ahead and double-sided sticky tape this to the case right here. For that I have some of this 3M, which might actually be overkill for this job, but it's what I have on hand. It's pretty sticky stuff. And I'm actually going to use a double layer on that because I don't like how close to the metal those contacts are. Flip that around. Stick it to the board. So when setting this up here, I found out a couple of interesting things. First of all, this print that I printed is actually bigger than the fan. And right here along the bottom, it was too big. It was riding right on top of this edge right here. So I just took my flush cutters and I cut that back a little bit. And then, if you remember, I glued this buck converter right there. So it interfered with these plastic dividers here that are between these high-powered connections. So these two come from the mean well of 24 volts, and those two actually go out to the heated bed. So that was two things that I had to fix. I had to chop this down just a little bit, and I just pulled this off real fast and moved it over. So we should be in good shape now. So I can go ahead and put the yellow on the positive, the orange on the negative. And those slip right on there just fine. And then this fits on there. And I've got my foot here. It's going to go right in that spot right there. Hold that on. And then I can put this one in this side over here. So this is probably going to be a problem. As I get this tightened down, you'll see that this is pretty much even with that screw right there. So they're very, very even. So that gives me just a little bit of airflow behind here, just between these screws and the plastic, but I'm going to want some more. So I'm going to go print me some spacers for that. I'm going to measure it to make sure that I can still use the same screws and get a spacer in there and maybe get at least, you know, a ½ inch of space underneath there and get some airflow underneath this fan. So I'll be right back. So I went and printed this spacer right here. So it ended up being about 6 millimeters thick. So I'm going to pull this back off of here. I just designed them up, print them out really quick. I guess if I needed more space, I could go with, I could go get me longer screws. These look like 5 millimeter screws. Anyways, I printed that so it would cap right on there like that, and the screw would barely have enough space to pull that few threads in through there. And now if you look at my spacing there, I have a considerable amount of space underneath that fan. Probably if I wanted it to flow better, I would print a little bit deeper spacers, a little bit taller spacers, and get that a little bit more space. But for now I'm going to go with that. I did print 4 of these, so the printer will continue to sit level. So I'll put 2 underneath the bottom feet, or the back feet, and 2 underneath the front feet, and I should be good to go. So I haven't got all of these little screws in yet. I haven't tested this yet. I'm going to wait and see. Here we go, moment of truth. Turning it on. There we go. We can feel that it's pulling some decent air in there. I can even feel some air coming out here. So we got some pretty good airflow going. Better than it was in the past. Way better. That other smaller 24-volt fan, when I had that in here, and when I plugged it into my power supply, I could barely feel any air moving at all. And I'm feeling air being sucked in on the back side of this. So it's actually, I'm sure, doing a much better job than that little 24-volt fan. Now I'm going to go ahead and put these little tiny screws back in that hold this bottom plate on. Hopefully that will help create tighter airflow. That would be nice. They're all lined up and ready to be put in, so it's not going to take very much time. And there you have it, all buttoned up and looking good. Well, there you have it. We ran into a couple of snags with it not fitting right and maybe gluing on that buck converter in the wrong spot, but I think it'll be nice. I think it'll work well. I think it will keep that main board cool, and I won't be skipping any steps. I don't really know if I was skipping any steps before, but it's a good idea to have extra cooling on there because my problems could have been caused by skipped steps. I don't know. I haven't had a chance to specifically test that yet. Now, this project was a little bit more difficult than I expected it to be, to tell you the truth. I really expected it to just be throw it down. I had all the parts printed. Oh, by the way, those fan grates that I had on there, those red printed fan grates, I did get those off of Thingiverse. I'll leave a link down in the description, attribution down in the description. I did not design those. I did, however, design the spacers for the feet. I can put those up on Thingiverse for you and leave a link down in the description as well. So if you want to do something like this, or if you have any need to print spacers for the feet on your D9, they'll be there. So I'd like to thank you for joining me in this episode of Grim 3D. Remember, subscribe if you like. Leave us a comment. Just make sure to keep it civil. Smash that like button, ring that bell, and we'll see you out there.